GL 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Great Barrington Select Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Pursuant to Mass General Law 7C 30A, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body or may transmit the meeting through any medium. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of such recording. So the Edge is recording and the town is recording, so that be forewarned, there are people recording this meeting. Any members of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. The listing of agenda items are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. Start with select board's announcements.
Steve, there's a hand up.
There's a hand up. Charlie Williamson? Is that who it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. I thought it said lower hand, so I hit it lower hand.
I lowered it. No problem, Charlie.
Okay, I just touched it again, but I didn't touch it
I'll
before.
touch it, Charlie.
I didn't touch it before, though.
No problem.
I'm sorry.
Problem. We're all set.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Selectmen's announcements or statements. Lee.
Nothing for me.
Kate.
I have things that are going to come up as the meeting goes on, so I'll just wait.
Thank you. Bill.
No, nothing.
Ed?
Nothing.
And I have nothing right now. Town manager's report.
Thanks, Steve. I have just 3 items tonight. The first one is a brief update on the Housatonic Waterworks situation. In your packet, you'll find a letter that I was asked to draft at our September 4th meeting, requesting assistance from Governor Baker's administration. Happy to make any edits the board would like me to make tonight. I did copy, you'll see at the bottom, Representative Pignatelli, Mass DEP, Mass DPU, and of course, Housatonic Waterworks. And I would also like to include, if you're okay with this, a copy of my July 24th executive summary to the board, just to give the governor's office a little brief summary, a little background on this situation.
That's the executive summary in the packet right after the letter?
Correct.
Updated. Okay.
I would ask that we also attach those letters that DEP sent to Housatonic Water Company, one in July and a follow-up one in August. I know that I had asked last week if we could get some answer or see what Jim Mercer had sent to them, and I know that Mark, you've asked and you haven't been able to receive that from DEP. Is that correct?
I spoke to Brian Barrington today, so I have a little update I'll touch on in just
okay, great. But I think that those correspondence that have been sent to Housatonic Waterworks from the DEP gives us even more context to the governor. And also in talking with you earlier today, I think we should also be sending, well, I guess it would, in my mind, I was thinking, kind of the same letter, but addressed to the Attorney General as well, because I think this is a consumer protection issue. But perhaps just CCing her on that, I think it's up to you guys as to what you think is more appropriate, but I think sending her a letter separately is warranted at this point.
I have one person who has their hand up. I'll briefly see what their question is. Vicky, Marilyn.
you letting me speak?
Yeah,
Yeah. Hi, my name is Vicki Winman. I live about 6 houses down from the airport. And
yeah, this is about the Housatonic water. we're
oh,
doing.
I apologize. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it. Okay, thank you. I'll raise my hand later. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So probably it's cleaner if we just copy the Attorney General on this instead
I
of
can't
having.
stay up all this time and do that right now. I just, but
I think that's probably the best way of doing it. I think it's a good idea. Just cleaner so we don't have two letters out there. And probably should copy Senator Hines also.
Otherwise, does the letter work for the board?
Yes, for me it does.
Yes.
I think I did when, so in asking to include the information, I think it would be good to reference those two asks that DEP had of Housatonic Water Works in July and in August, and mentioning that we as a town have not heard or do not know and cannot get a hold of the response from Housatonic Water Works. If that is indeed correct, although I guess you are updating us on that, but that, this isn't just something that we have received complaints from that we as a municipality are reaching out on, but also that DEP has communicated with them. I don't know. I mean, that's in there, but I think just to further know that there have been, work issues that have been.
Okay.
My only concern with that is we don't want to look like that's our only issue. In other words, our issue is that, but it's also much bigger. So I don't want the governor to get us a response on that and say, okay, done.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, for me
Clear
as
how to
well,
do that, Mark.
it seems like it's addressed in the letter, but I would hate to kind of get too murky and add too much, but
Yeah. I guess what I was trying to get at is that we're not getting up the follow up that we're looking for, which again, you're right. Getting that follow up doesn't mean your hands can be wiped clean of what's happening, but that I mean, it's a great letter. That was my only suggestion, but if no one agrees with me, that's fine too.
We want to make a motion to, on behalf of the select board, to send this letter to the governor, copy the Attorney General and everyone else who's listed on it.
And plus Adam Hines, so moved.
And Adam, yeah. And seconded.
second.
So I have a motion by Ed, a second by Bill. Any discussion by the select board? All votes tonight are roll call. So Lee,
Aye.
Kate,
Aye.
Bill, aye, Ed,
Aye.
and I. It's unanimous.
Thank you. I'll get that letter out tomorrow. And before we move on to the next topic, I was also asked by Kate at the last meeting to provide an update on that order, which I think when I spoke to you earlier today, Kate, I had not connected yet with Brian at DEP. I did finally connect with him this afternoon, and I don't have a great deal of information to provide right now. But I was told that DEP dispatched two of their senior engineers to the facility, the Housatonic Water Works treatment facility, to do an in-depth inspection. So we're in the process now of, we're just really in a holding pattern waiting for that report to be delivered to DEP. And Brian promised us that he would share that report with us. So as soon as I have something more to share with the board, of course I will do that.
Mark, I had a question. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask if we had some sort of timeline for when that report would be ready.
No, he couldn't give me a timeline. He hasn't seen anything from his engineers yet, but at least we're seeing some movement from DEP, and they're taking a deep dive into what may be happening or may not be happening up there.
Mark, who do we know who owns the water tower in Housatonic? Does the Housatonic Water Works own that?
I don't know the answer to that, Lee, but that has come up a few times, and I will research that and get back to the board.
Thank you.
Sure. It's on my list. I guess I would ask now, and I'll jump back. I have one other topic to cover, but Sean Van Duzen is on the line to provide an infrastructure update to the board on a number of projects that are in various stages of design, completion, permitting, and whatnot. So I'd like to promote Sean to be a panelist and ask him to provide an update.
I assume he's under Town of Great Barrington. By that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There he is.
All right, so I guess I'll just pop into. I've got a list of about 20 projects that are ongoing right now. They're not all the projects. There's probably another 15 or 20. So just because I don't mention a project doesn't mean it's not in some stage of development. And feel free to ask me about anything you want to at any time. I'll start off with the current design for the emergency repair in Division Street. So Ty and Bonis is about to submit the Chapter 85 review to Mass DOT, which is the final step before we're able to go out to bid for the emergency work that will take place probably this winter. So I talked to Andrea earlier today, and it looks like we're communicating pretty well with Mass DOT, and we don't anticipate too many problems with the review, but it might be a month or two before we're completed with that. And I'll have an updated schedule from Ty and Bond probably in the next 3 or 4 weeks in terms of our ideas for construction and probable time for reopening the bridge. The next project, you guys have any questions on that? The next project is the triplex parking lot, Bridge Street. That's the phase 2 of the MassWorks grant that we completed last summer. We're just getting out to bid for that in the next 2 or 3 weeks. There was some delay in terms of completing some electrical design for the car charging stations that were in the parking lot. That, as well as the outdoor dining, would have been interrupted if we had tried to do that work this summer. So we didn't want to push through too fast and destroy that, given what's the circumstances. So that's about ready to go out to bid for a start this spring. I want to also add that project, the engineering estimates were off by $1.5 million for phase 1, and that extra money we had to divert from other roads and from other projects. So that was essentially a 1.5 years or 2 years of paving that we had to move into completing this project. So a lot of the scheduling for road paving has been sort of shuffled up as a result of that, and also increases in asphalt prices last year. When we paved Oak and Lake Mansfield, the prices were astronomical in terms of completing that work compared to what we had anticipated. So we're kind of reshuffling things around right now. Piggybacking on that, Beta Engineering is about to start the pavement management plan, which has been several years in the work. We got a grant for that work 3 years ago to cover the first portion, and we executed a contract 6 months ago for them to start the final design, which will give us a sort of working electronic document of all the roads, all the sidewalks, and a very in-depth analysis of the condition of the road, and also what it will take to rebuild them, and also associated costs. So we have a out-year plan that will be much more detailed than anything we've had before. They were supposed to start that this spring, but the company locked down and hadn't been meeting with any clients or doing any field work until about a month ago. So they're getting ready to start soon. The next project, we have emergency repairs that are taking place or about to take place at the wastewater treatment plant. The aeration tank has been down for several months, and it's essential for our function. We went out to bid. Unfortunately, there were no bidders. It's a very strange bidding environment right now. So we are declaring an emergency along with the engineering firm DPC, and looks like we'll be able to complete that work in the next 2 months, which is a necessity. We went out to bid to do the 4 remote pump stations about a month ago. in the middle of the bidding phase, we found that we had a permitting issue with DEP for compensatory storage at one of our pump stations, which caused us to have to delay the bid opening, or delay the bid completely rather, and to redesign one of the pump stations to not have to get compensatory storage. So a long story, but regardless, we're going back out to bid in 2 months. So we'll be starting those pump stations first thing in the spring. On that note, we have started the updated sewer rate analysis. Given that these projects at the plant are coming along, there's going to be obviously changes with finances. The board had asked to look into doing some adjustments to the fee schedule as well. So Dave will be presenting an updated analysis and what it will look like to do abatements as well, probably at the end of November to the commissioners, maybe a little bit earlier. So we'll have some better numbers in our capital long term, and I'm probably going to be asking for a increase in the sludge disposal for the plant, as we have a lot of out of town residents that are living here full time, and they're having their septic hauled to the plant and disposing of it, and it does generate revenue for us, but it also taxes the plant, which is why I had to ask for more money at the last special meeting. So I'll be asking for you guys to increase the rate of septage for night soils. You guys might, next project, you guys might see some people walking around the parks. Time Bond has started a asset management and capital plan for all the parks as part of a process that the Parks Department had started several years ago and vetted. And so we've started parks inventory needs assessment along with a capital plan. We're expecting that to take a couple weeks, and there'll be some public input at some point in terms of what the long-term plans of all the parks are going to be. But they started that last week. Time Bond also is starting a GIS mapping asset management plan for our stormwater collection system. This was part of a $180,000 grant that the town received a couple of months ago. So that's good news, and it's much needed. We don't have a lot of good mapping of that infrastructure, so they'll be able to tell us what needs replacement and what kind of order more formally, which we'll incorporate into our long-term capital plan for the road paving as well. So you can kind of do upgrades to the stormwater and to the roads and have a more total view of what we're dealing with when we go to pave a road. It's not so simple as just throwing some asphalt. So they're going to start that, I think, next month. The next project, EDM Engineering, is doing the work to get a new boiler installed at Ramsdale, hopefully before winter comes. That was a part of the funding we received last year at the annual. It's kind of an important project because we don't know how much longer that heating system is going to survive. So we're trying to get that done before winter sets in, and hopefully we get there. The Main Street sidewalk in Housatonic, which was a replacement project, it was part of the Complete Streets grant the town received. That's out to bid right now. I think we have a pre-bid or pre-construction meeting, pre-bid conference next week. So we'll be starting that work first thing in the spring. That's the replacement of that sidewalk on Main Street, which will be an asset in terms of pedestrian safety in that area. So we also opened bids for the police station roof. La Rochelle, that's a roof replacement project that was approved 2 years ago. La Rochelle was a low bidder at $80,000. They'll be starting that work in the next 6 weeks. They'll be done by January 1st. Fortunately, we were $100,000 below the estimate we had for the roof project, so that's one bit of good news. The bid documents are nearly complete for the Route 7 trail, the old Route 7 trail. Goes from CHP to the brewery. So we're going to be going to bid for that in the next 2 weeks, and that will be a springtime construction project as well. Also, the town hall front steps are going out to rebid this winter for a springtime replacement. We did not have enough funds initially to do the work, even with additional funds. I think twice we asked for. We have found some money that will cover the cost and found some ways to reduce the cost of manufacturing the steps. So that's going back out to bid this winter. as well as the final stage of the transfer station garage, which needs electrical work to be done, and it's still in heat. So that is going back out to bid next month. We are at about 75% designed for the culvert replacement on Christian Hill, which is a old stone sort of culvert that we discovered when we were paving up there. That is going to go out to bid first thing in the spring. We're trying to figure out how to minimize the impact of the traffic with the current construction on the bridge. We don't want to have that road closed as well, so it might be something where we try to figure out how to have the timing happen after the bridge is complete. As well, being worked on is the Taconic Avenue retaining wall. That's under design right now. I don't think they're quite as far along as the culvert project, but that will be a springtime project. We will be opening bids for that this fall or this winter, depending on historic sort of considerations. Also, Beta Engineering has completed several assessments of tripping hazards on Main Street, and we'll be actively trying to address those trip hazards as funding is available and as timing sort of works out, considering we don't want to have downtown all ripped up all at once. So we're going to strategically pick those tripping hazards and fix them probably in terms of the most dangerous first, but I'm also trying to time them for spring and fall so we're not impacting downtown businesses too much. The town also received a $163,000 grant for the green communities. So we'll be doing work at the Houston Community Center, Town Hall, and the Great Barrington Police Department. I think you guys had a press release about this. So there's a whole bunch of energy conservation measures are going to be taking place. That work will all be taking place late this fall and this winter. I solicited proposals for the elevator repairs here from EDM Engineering as well. So I haven't executed a contract, but we're going to be able to do that work this winter. It's kind of good timing considering there's not that much traffic at Town Hall. We are continuing the engineering on phase 2 engineering of the South Main Street TIP project, which is a grant that we're in the queue for, but we have not been given a grant yet. That's a substantial project to rebuild South Main Street. The grant funding from that was pretty much all dried up this last year. There was no new projects moved forward in the TIP. So we're optimistic that next year we'll be able to move forward and hopefully get some grant money to do South Main Street over with new sidewalks. AECOM will also be doing the study of the transfer station, which is a project I know that's been a long time in the making. AECOM was also shut down as a result of the virus, and they're just going out to do field work. So that'll be taking in sort of a broad look at the transfer station, the revenue we're generating, and also coming up with a way to sell the tickets through a kiosk or online, so we're not having to have the town clerk sell them to everybody all the time. There's a couple different municipalities around that are doing that now. So yeah, I think that the other projects that are coming up is there's a drainage project that has to happen on Rochester Street, as well as paving projects on that road. And at the same time we do that, we're going to be doing the rest of Elm Court to sort of finish that downtown corridor from the MassWorks project, as well as the Fairview Terrace area downtown. That's getting engineered right now to do some repaving and some pedestrian safety measures there. There's some drainage issues associated with it that we're trying to figure out because the sidewalk is at the same level as the road. Also, being worked on right now is the remaining softball and baseball fields that haven't been done.
Did you
Hello?
message? No, I saw you call.
Got it.
Sorry. So the remaining baseball and softball fields, we're also getting engineering numbers and come up with to do repairs to Memorial Field and the 2 softball fields that are left down to be repaired. We did the minor league field and the little league field 2 years ago. So those projects are all in the works. There is more projects too, but I didn't have time to come up with all of them in the short time. But those are the sort of bigger ones that we're working on right now.
Select Board, any questions or comments?
Sean, thank you. This is a great overview of all the work that's going on. So kudos to everyone in the department and to yourself. because it covers so many varied locations in Great Barrington, is this something that would be helpful for residents to have kind of a rundown, just so they have a sense of what's being worked on? So if they have questions, that they can see that there's a location being planned or out to bid, or would that just complicate things? Because I was trying to take notes, and I was just thinking, as a resident, some of these things might be helpful for people to know that it's coming
Right.
up.
Yeah. So I think that the thing about what we're doing here is creating asset management databases for a lot of the infrastructure that hadn't existed. Once we have that formalized, we'll present them to the public, and there'll be something we can put on the town webpage as we go along, especially the pavings projects. We have a ton of roads that have not been paved in 40 or 50 years, dozens and dozens. I mean, and so you guys, I'm sure, are hearing a lot of flack about them, as am I. But we need to have this pavement management plan in place that's really formal and really sort of hammers home what roads we need to address and in what order. It's definitely a large number associated with catching back up because we're pretty far behind. But I think it'll be a good asset for the town to have and for residents to see just what's in the works.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I just had a question on the triplex parking lot. So you mentioned it was off by $1.5 million. Could you speak about that? Is that because there's so many delays, or was that quite a lot of money to be off?
Yeah, so those were, it might have been just $1 million, but it was quite a lot. So it was just the engineering numbers were way off in terms of what the contractors bid. There were a lot of high prices, and sometimes the bidding environment can just be bad, and that's what happens. So what happened was we cut the project down to make it fit with what we had for a grant. Now we're moving forward with the second phase of the project with additional town funding now, actually Chapter 90 funding primarily.
So what is exactly in the triplex parking lot that we cut? I mean, what's not being done, and
So,
how did we manage to save that $1 million?
So the original project was supposed to include Railroad Street, Elm Street, triplex parking lot, all of Bridge Street and Church Street. We ended up doing Railroad, leaving the parking lot and leaving part of Bridge, and also Bentley Avenue was a part of it too. So we ended up cutting a couple roads out. So Bentley, half of Bridge Street, and Chicago parking lot to make the project fit in the budget we had.
Okay, so these still need to be done eventually. So will that be coming back up in another budget cycle?
That was the second. So that was the second. I know I gave you a lot of updates. That was the second update. That's going to be out to bid. I'd say within a couple of weeks. So we'll be starting that first thing in the spring.
Okay. And I just have one other question about the tripping hazards. So if people have requests about tripping hazards, can they send something to you saying, hey, is this going to be, fixed, or is it just something that you're going to be going around and you have your own notes?
I would encourage anyone that falls to email so we can keep in mind where people are falling and make a note of it. But we have quite a few places that need to be addressed, and we can't do them all at once. It would eat up like a year of paving budget. Okay. And it also would, be quite invasive. Some of the fixes are easier. We can address those sooner, but some of them are pretty intrusive in terms of what's going to need to happen.
Okay. So if any residents have issues with tripping hazards, they should send it to you.
Yes, have everyone call me if they trip. I always want to hear about it, and I always make a note of it, and I want to have a report about it too.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, this is kind of more COVID related and specific to a project that's going on now. Do we have any way of asking? I mean, I'm thinking specifically of the Brown Bridge, soon to be the Orange Bridge, that the workers are out there without masks on. And I mean, they're really close together, they work together, maybe it's totally fine, but it feels very central in town for people to be going by and seeing a group of people without masks on. It just is very off-putting to me. Is there any way for you to communicate with them, or should we communicate with the state?
I can send an email to the state unless you want to, Mark, just saying that there's been concerns raised, but it's obviously their project.
Right.
We'll take care of it.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Sean, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
Steve, I have one more
Yes.
I'd like to cover before we move on, and that's an executive summary in your packet for elderly and disabled population transportation. Briefly, I just wanted to bring this back tonight because I think I promised at the last meeting that I would keep you up to date as we approach the September 30th closure date for SBETC, our transportation program. Holly Mann, our senior center director, drafted this as a way to update the board. And in summary here, we're going to piece together some transportation options for the month of October. We need a little more time. We need a little more time for BRTA to transfer ownership of the vans from Southern Berkshire Elderly Transportation to the Great Barrington Council on Aging. They need to be relettered. They need to be serviced and cleaned. So there will be a little delay, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows that we will have transportation available for them. In the meantime, we'll just be using other options, other local options, such as this RSVP program, which is matching drivers with riders. And all people have to do is call our senior center at 528-1881, and we will get you a ride to your doctor's appointment, to the pharmacy, to the grocery store, whatever you need. And we hope to have the vans back from BRTA and in our ownership and control by November 1st. So there will be a little delay and a little disruption in service, but it should be short-lived. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, let's go under new business, which we happen to have a lot tonight. Eric Sternagel, Southern Berkshire Real Estate Update. Eric, go ahead.
Thank you, Steve. So thank you guys, first of all, for having me come in and giving you a quick little update about what our market has been doing in the last few months here. I'm sure everybody has heard it's absolutely insane. Tom Doyle's also on the call, also as a town monitor for the town of Great Barrington. But I got together with our CEO and basically put together a short summary of what specific to Great Barrington and what we've seen. So basically in Great Barrington, residential sales continue to surge past 2019 rates with a year-to-date increase of 16% in the total number of sales and a 43% increase in the dollar volume of those transactions. So that's basically more houses went on the market, is what that translates into. That's pushed the median sales price of houses in Great Barrington to $466,540. So that is up from $380,000 last year. So there were 19 homes sold in Great Barrington in August, which was up from the previous year of 12, but down from the previous month, which was 24 homes in July sold. So we've doubled sales over the last year. So listings placed on the market for sale are up 4% year to date, with a continuing increase in August. 30 new homes hit the market, valued at over $20 million. The months of residential home inventory. So this is what we call an absorption rate. So this is basically what it would take to sell every house that we have for sale right now in Great Barrington, which historically has always been in the double digits of months of inventory. That double digit number has plummeted to 3.6 months of inventory right now. So, we just don't have the houses for sale. So basically there are 87 residential homes on the market right now in Great Barrington compared to 135 this time last year. So as you can see, there's definitely a shortage of homes for sale, which is the driving force of our market. High demand, low inventory. It's kind of the perfect storm also with interest rates at historic lows. Pending sales going into September are still strong. We have 51 homes under contract right now compared to 23 last year. So that's pretty crazy. The only trend in Great Barrington that's different from the rest of the residential market in Berkshire County It lies in the median list and sales prices. So in August, interestingly enough, Great Barrington median prices fell slightly. This could signify that more moderately priced homes are coming on the market and are selling quickly. So that's something that's been different than the past. Great Barrington's residential real estate sales year to date has now topped $50 million, up from $35 million last year. So I actually have a whole report, market data report specific to Great Barrington. It also shows where Great Barrington compares with the rest of Berkshire County. I'll email that to every one of you after this meeting. And Tom, do you have anything you want to follow up with? Or are there any questions first? Yay. Lee?
Thank you very much, Eric. So do you have any sense, or do the realtors ask when people purchase what their intention is? Whether, do you get any insight into what the intention is, whether they're going to be living here full time, or they're going to be renting it out, or they're moving their family? Is there any data available on that?
So we do not keep track of that data, but I can tell you kind of personal experience, and I'm sure Tom can pitch in with this as well. But so a lot of this market is driven, by COVID. People are escaping urban areas. I really want to be careful and not make this a city thing, because it's not just New York, it's not just Boston, it's any urban, densely populated area they're coming in for space. This second drive that we've seen in the market right now is lack of rentals. A lot of people were leaving the urban areas and coming in to try to rent a place for maybe a year or 2 years or whatever it took, and couldn't find access to that. So they've basically started purchasing homes. And I think we will see a correction in a couple of years. I do believe, there are quite a few people that are moving here with the intentions of staying here, raising families, whatever. But I do think some of those people probably will migrate back to urban areas in the future. What I've said and what I continue to say is, I think the most important drive to this market and the best thing in Berkshire County right now that's happened is the infrastructure increase that we have with internet and things like that. For the first time, a lot of people like to compare this to 9/11, post 9/11, when we saw a huge influx of people coming from the city or whatever. The difference that I see now is we couldn't sustain work from home jobs, back in 2000. Now people can easily work from home with access to our fiber optic internet and different things like that. The next part of this, I think, is going to be communications for cell phones and different things like that people are still going to find limited access in. We still hear that chirping, around people complaining about. But I think that component will keep people in the Berkshires longer, to be able to sustain life here with salaries from other parts of the country.
So following up, maybe this is a question for Superintendent Peter Dillon, but I'm just wondering the effect on the school system if we're seeing a lot more enrollments this year tied with Boone.
Yeah, I can't speak to Berkshire Hills. I don't have that data, but I can say, Steve, maybe you do, but I can say that what we're hearing is both school districts, Southern Berkshire and Berkshire Hills, have seen an increase in enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
Those data figures are as of October 1st, so the actual official data figures will come out sometime in late October.
Great, thank you. Kate?
Yeah, I was wondering, you've obviously put together a whole bunch of numbers, and I know sometimes when we get numbers from you, you give us an average kind of amount of days house has been on the market for over 400,000 and under 400, or maybe it's 450. Are those numbers in what you put together for us today by any chance?
I did not do that. I did not do any specific price range. Okay. I left it, to me, it's more fascinating the how little inventory we have, and the median sales price was really shocking to me and how much that increased. So
Right.
I can certainly run that for you. That's not difficult to do. And if you'd like any specific price range, I can do that.
I guess I was just curious because we've in the past seen the houses at the lower end of the spectrum sell faster than those on the higher end, tend to sit longer. And obviously as the median sales price goes up, I was just kind of wondering if those kind of amount of time that a house is sitting on the market is kind of coming into some sort of middle line. So I would be curious if you wouldn't mind sending those numbers. I'd be curious to see them.
Sure. I can tell you that basically anything historically, anything under, we say 300, maybe that's 275 has basically just flown off the shelf, if you would. What I've noticed in the last few months is that pocket of 475 to 650. That's historically been our slowest market. It seemed like where we had the most inventory that was just kind of stagnant sitting there. That has been one of our strongest markets right now. So, which would correlate with the fact that people with higher incomes are coming in to the area to purchase those homes.
Thank you. That's very telling. I guess
Eric?
the other side of that we're hearing, or at least I've been hearing a lot, is from people who are renting homes or have been renting homes here long term that are now being asked to leave as their landlord is putting their home on the market for a number that they can't afford to purchase. And obviously you can't fault somebody for taking advantage of this to kind of home, liquidate, I guess, an asset or of something that they've been sitting on. But we also, again, have this shortage of rental. As somebody as both of you as experts kind of in this real estate field in Berkshires, could you offer any suggestions about what we could be doing to help support renters, specifically long-term renters, either in the short term or in the long term as we move forward?
I think it's a tough that's a tough thing to solve because we're in an area where the only way landlords can afford to keep rent down right now is if they've owned the house and don't have a mortgage or anything on it. When a landlord or a new person purchases a multifamily unit, they have certain expenses to cover. Look at the increase in heating costs over the last years, the increases in property taxes, increases in insurance, all those things have increased. That I don't know how you solve that problem, but it's a real problem. Maybe Tom, you could speak to that.
Tom, go ahead. You're next anyways.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve and Eric. Just to get back to Kate's point, there's a major article in current issue of Berkshire Trade and Commerce, starts on page 21. And in that article, I commented, and this is something that I don't think has been mentioned before, is that over the winter months, pre-COVID, very stealthily, very surprisingly, the inventory under $500,000 dried up. So there was sort of this early movement into buying. We still haven't figured out what it did. I think we just got to such a bottoming point after a long decade plus of heavy inventory. And so that's my point. Read the article in Berkshire Trade and Commerce. As to the point of supply and demand, and Mark Brahensky, Ed Abrams, Steve Bannon have heard me. Very simple. Smooth out the approval process. Smooth out the approval process, you'll have more supply of housing stock. Very simple. Just to get back on Eric's numbers, I did a little deeper dive, and this is South County. So Eric said the inventory is down to a 3.1 month supply. In absolute numbers, active listing homes on the market in South County, August over August of 19, is down 44%. If we back out the new inventory that came on the market in August, the adjusted inventory decline would be 66% year over year, August to August. And the other interesting number, total pending sales in South County at the end of August, things that are under contract, they may have gone into contract in May, June, July, or August, $87 million. That number a year ago was $36 million. And what I find even amazing, people will keep asking every week, will this continue? Will this continue? Of the $87 million that is awaiting closing right now in South County, $50 million of that went on the books in August. It is just outstanding. And you'll be happy to know, maybe not so happy, that of the 50 million that of the 87 million that's pending closing now at the end of August, 37 million of it is in Great Barrington.
So Tom, I mean, this just speaks to me because I have this worry about the lack of rentals, and my fear is that those that are purchasing houses will then, let's say in a year's time, decide to go back where they came from and either put this on as an Airbnb rental and miss out the local residents that really are in dire need of long-term rental. So I guess I'm just speaking out loud saying it speaks to me about our need to regulate, Airbnb, because, I fear that this is just going to be an investor's market. And, if you want to give us some thought about that, but this is really frightening to me, because I would hate for all these houses, to become Airbnbs in a year's time.
It's a good forward thought, and Eric and I can attest that we're simply realtors. We're not predictionists, but no, I share your concern. I think we were already moving in that direction, pre-COVID. I think that I had always stated that I thought that the short-term rental market hurt both ends of the market. It hurt the entry level for first-time home buyers, lack of inventory where investors would buy those up. And at the upper end of the market, who wants to buy a significant house, which I experienced in Alford, when someone can rent it for half the year for a fraction of the price.
Yeah. So dovetailing onto that, I just like to say a call to action to the select board, and I'm speaking to myself as well, is that we really need to get ahead of this and, put this on our to-do list. I like immediately. So, Mark, if we can put this on an agenda as soon as possible, because I really want to get ahead of this, because I am frightened.
Lee, I don't disagree with you. We've been there and done that, so this isn't like the first time.
No, I know, but I just like to bring it up and, make it a.
We had a lot of opposition to it, so not
I
everyone
think
agrees
it's
with us.
time to go back and talk about it.
So one thing, I'm sorry, one thing I want to point out also is, Tom just gave you really scary statistics for all of South County. The statistics that we're looking at in Great Barrington, while we're seeing an increase and an uptick, I don't think they're as bad as all of South County combined. So I want to keep those separate, as to what we both just told you there. And I think when I email these reports over to you guys and you can see, the numbers in black and white, and I have a little, blurb here also kind of reiterating what I said, that, if you have any other questions, we can run all those reports to really get black and white. And, sometimes numbers don't tell the whole story also. So.
Okay, we have one person who would like to speak, Pachano. I assume it's Pedro, but I won't jump to conclusions.
Yeah, that's me. Can you hear me?
Yes, just
All right,
name
good.
and address, please.
Pedro Pachana, 5 Abbey Hill. I just want to make a request that the information that was just presented be sent to the members of the planning board who are also members of the housing subcommittee.
Yes, absolutely, Pedro.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move ahead on the board?
I just wanted to quickly reiterate in this kind of bringing up the conversation of talking about Airbnbs. One of the things we've been waiting for is a housing study from from Berkshire Regional Planning, and we should be getting that soon. So I think that we are on target to move forward with those conversations. Maybe not quickly, but at least with a lot more information behind it instead of just fear.
Any other questions? Tom, Eric, thank you very much. We always enjoy this. We missed the yearly get together this year. Hopefully we'll be able to do it in person next year.
Great. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Eric. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda is Select Board Department Liaisons. We didn't get in our packet who the liaison list. So I think it's probably best if we move this to our next meeting. So we'll just skip over that for tonight. Mark, you want to go over your recommendations or the executive summary, I should say, for Halloween and trick or treat?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. You'll see in your packet, there's a very, very brief
Hello?
executive.
I don't know what
Sorry.
that is.
There's a very brief executive summary for Halloween and trick or treat. I had a conversation with Rebecca Jerzik, our health agent, late last week before putting this together. She suggested that we wait until the Department of Public Health releases some information, some guidelines for us on how we should proceed before making any plans that we have to backtrack on. So that would be my recommendation, that we take this up at our October 5th meeting and hope that DPH releases something in the meantime.
Yeah, I think that makes perfectly good sense. Go ahead, Kate.
Do you think that, I mean, not that we need to make a decision now, but do you think after an October 5th meeting, that'll give us enough time to get the word out, do what needs to be done? I realize that seems like a month away from Halloween, but sometimes I think if we don't have the information, then we need to make a decision then instead of waiting until our following meeting, which is the 26th, which would be way too late.
Yes.
So I think regardless, we have to make a decision then.
Agreed.
And I did have a thought about doing something sort of like a reverse parade, and I did just talk to Charlie Berger, like worst case scenario, we can't do any sort of trick-or-treating, and the fire department is on board if that's the direction we need to go in. So I've already been exploring and asking people to give any sort of ideas and backup plans that they might have.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, next on the agenda, Mark, Berkshire Health Group, the disclosure form for voting members.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. This is a really easy one. We just need myself and Karen Fink, our treasurer collector. We need select board approval for our disclosure statements. Of course, our only conflict of interest is that we are employees of Great Barrington, and we're also BHG members as employees. So I'd like to have the board renew our appointments for this fiscal year.
Do you have a motion?
So moved.
And second. So I have a motion by Ed, a second by Bill. Discussion. No discussion. A roll call vote. Lee?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And aye. It's unanimous. Okay. Open meeting law complaint. Do I have a motion?
Oh.
Yep.
Because I have recused myself from the airport, and this is regarding the airport, I am also going to recuse myself from this because I technically wasn't in that meeting or part of that meeting.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
I was going to move to endorse and send Mark's proposed response.
Do I have
Second.
a second? So I have a motion by Bill, a second by Lee. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion by the board, it's a roll call vote. Lee?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And aye. It's a unanimous vote. Thank you. Leash law dog park. Mark?
Sure. Thanks again, Steve. Also in your packet, another executive summary for this evening. A little background on this. We had a resident stop in last week to express her concern that there is no location in town where dogs can run free. She suggested in her email to the board, which I included in the packet, that we consider hours at certain locations, whether it's Lake Mansfield Park or the McAllister Wildlife Refuge, that we have specific hours during the day or a day during the week or something along those lines where dogs are allowed to run free. So you'll see, in addition to the executive summary in your packet, I included the email from this resident. I also included a copy of the Conservation Commission regulations for the McAllister Wildlife Property, and also our bylaws on leashing.
So it would seem to me that we should refer these, we don't have control over McAllister property, and we don't have first control over the parks. Plus, if they want to do this, we would have to change our bylaws, because right now our bylaws are very clear. So I would think that we would want to refer these to the parks and to the conservation to get their opinion and have them report back to us, and then we can go from there. Because if they're not interested, it's not going to work anyways. The properties are under their control.
I would also add the Cemetery Commission to that list.
So, yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Sorry, I realize it's out of our control, but is it something that, since it's a policy, that the select board could make a recommendation? I just feel that, for us to discuss it might be good, so we can kind of have some kind of recommendation. Or it should be in reverse.
I've been working for a little over a year on a dog park, a fenced-in dog park somewhere, and we retained some of the land that we took in foreclosure. We retained it needs to be cleared this year, and then we're going to talk next year about a park. But I think the way to go is to follow it to those committees. In other words, when McAllister comes before conservation, and any of us who are interested should be there and listen. Ultimately, it does have to go back to town meeting because it requires a bylaw change. Rather than just see it go to town meeting as a citizen's petition, it would be great if it goes working through the committees that actually have jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So it's not my way of saying no, Lee. It's like, let's follow the process and let it come back to us.
Okay. I mean, it would be great when it comes back to us for us to have a discussion.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? So Mark, you'll handle the contacts for the conservation, parks, and cemetery?
I'll forward this on to all three.
Okay, thank you very much. National Grid and Verizon for a joint pole petition to install a joint pole on Park Street beginning at a point approximately 1,400 feet north of the center line of the intersection of Mountain Street within the public right-of-way in order to properly support existing infrastructure. The current guy wire is anchored into a tree across the street and it is failing. So I need to make someone hear from National Grid. There it is, Steve Haywood. Go right ahead, Steve.
Steve Haywood, National Grid. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so I mean, you read it all there in the packet. We're just looking we have a guy wire that goes to a tree across the street. That's a practice that we no longer do. So we're looking to get permission to install a pole there instead.
Motion to approve.
Second.
So I have a motion by Ed, a second by Bill. Any discussion?
Why is it called a guy wire?
Yeah, so actually funny, a lot of people mistake it as guide wire, but yeah, I can't answer why it's a guy wire, but I'm not
Okay. That's all.
Is there anyone on the line who been a butter or would like to speak on this? If there are, just raise your hand. You just press *9 if you're on a phone. So I don't see anyone. Okay, it's a roll call vote. Lee,
Aye.
Kate,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
and I. It's unanimous. Thank you very much for waiting.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Special permit application from Berkshire Aviation Enterprises for an aviation field in an R4 zone at 70 Agremont Plain Road, Great Barrington, per sections 3.1.4 E1 and 10.4 of the zoning bylaw. So I need a motion to reopen the public hearing.
So moved.
And second?
Roll call, Lee,
Aye.
Kate. Oh, Kate's recused. I'm sorry, you were still on the screen. I forgot. Thank you. And Ed?
Aye.
And I, it's unanimous. So this is going to sound a lot like what I said last meeting, but forgive me, it's about the same. We do have 63 people on the line right now for those keeping count at home. There will be some public comment tonight, limited because this is our fourth meeting, three of which this will be the third with public comment. So, and public comment for residents of Great Barrington and Housatonic only, limited to 3 minutes. There were 2 or 3 people on the line last time who did not get to speak because I had closed off public comment. Then they raised their hand. So one is Claudio Shapiro, and I think the Houses, and I will let them speak. If you've spoken once already, I'll let you speak, but I'm going to limit it because it's getting repetitious. This has gone on for a while. So first tonight, we're going to hear from the petitioner briefly, any new information or responses to previous meetings information. Then public comment. We're going to really try to confine the remarks to new materials presented. Then we're going, hopefully after the select board has spoken, we're going to this time try to close the public hearing. And then at the next meeting, we will start to discuss the findings and only ask questions of clarification to the applicant at the next meeting. So select board will be the last one to speak tonight, to ask questions or comments, and then we will move ahead. So I'll start off with, if I can find. There's Dennis. Thank you for raising your hand, Dennis. That made it quicker. Now lost Dennis. Mark, if you can see Dennis in here, that would be great. There he is. Dennis Egan, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make this brief. I just wanted to touch on a submission that I made to the board last week and a response from Attorney Hewer. I just wanted to touch on a couple things. Attorney Hewer contends in his response that BAE admits to being a small quantity generator. This is under the Water Quality Protection Overlay District. And I just want to point out that that's factually inaccurate. And on page 5 of the original application, we indicate that under 310 CMR 30, the airport is a very small quantity generator. On page 8, we refer to what is known as a conditionally exempt small quantity generator. That is wholly different than a small quantity generator. This is where words and terms are vitally important. So a conditionally exempt small quantity generator, that term is used interchangeably with very small quantity generator. And so there is no admission that by BAE or by me that BAE is a small quantity generator. It is not. One need only look at the DEP database, which clearly indicates that it's a very small quantity generator. So I just wanted to touch on that to make that clarification. And then Attorney Hewer raises issues with the daily takeoffs and landings. It refers to the master record. The master record draws on information estimates. That is the Department of Transportation, Division of Avionics. The fact of the matter is that the takeoffs and landings that we submitted are based on actual count and not estimates, and those are updated. And then one other point that Attorney Hewer raises in his response is that BAE admits to not having runway safety areas. That's akin to making a argument that I admit to not having sprinklers in my home. Fact of the matter is, I'm not required by law to have sprinklers in my home, and the airport is not required by law to have runway safety areas. So again, at the risk of taking too much time, I just wanted to speak to those two issues that were raised in Attorney Hewer's correspondence because they matter and they're material to the issues at hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Jay Fingeroff. You are unmuted. Just unmute yourself now, please.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. We have heard, you have heard, and we who have tuned into these meetings in the past have heard a variety of facts, a variety of opinions, and a variety of points of view expressed with regard to the application that the airport, applications the airport has made. I think that as a nearby resident, we're residents of Hurlburt Road, within distinct earshot of the airport and certainly frequent earshot of the takeoffs and landings, that there is absolutely no doubt in the minds, in our minds and in those of our neighbors, that the airport has become increasingly a nuisance and increasingly a disruption to those of us who live in the area and who live in the flight paths of the increasing number of planes, the increasing noise that those planes are making, and the paths that they seem to take. As I think I observed once before when I approached the airport about this a month or so ago, I was told essentially that they will do what they can to encourage the pilots to not do this, but that there's not much they can do about it. To me, that really sort of says it all. It does not show any commitment, any real structural change or anything else that they might see fit to do to stop or reduce the disruption that they are making. I think that I would hope that the select board would, in making its decision, take into account, and prominently so, the interests of the residents of Great Barrington, both the neighbors of the airport and the larger community, and not those who utilize the airport for their own enjoyment, their recreation, but many or most of whom have nothing to do with this community and do not come to this community for other than that. We've heard that they may patronize certain businesses in the area. I'd be surprised if there are major statistics available on that, but I'd also be surprised if there's much validity to it. We've also heard that they will be paying or could be paying increased taxes. My impression is it's de minimis numbers, certainly with respect to the town, and even with respect to what the neighbors in this area pay in taxes for their own real estate commitments. And so I would only encourage the select board to please prominently in its consideration take into account the interests of those of us who are the neighbors of the airport and whose enjoyment has been significantly reduced as a result of the airport and its recent and prospective activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tad Hewer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ted Hewer, on behalf of several of the neighbors. I will be brief, as Mr. Egan was. I point out that on the question about the WPPOD bylaw and the generator status, the applicant has pointed out in its application, it cited its federal EPA status. You will know that the bylaw is tied to its status under state law, not federal law. Under federal law, you're allowed to exclude waste oil from your hazardous waste calculation. And if you do so, maybe you do qualify for conditionally exempt or very small generator status under federal law. That's not the same thing under Massachusetts law. In Massachusetts, waste oil actually counts as hazardous waste. for purposes of determining your generator status. Waste oil is a listed hazardous waste under 310 CMR 30, 0.131 for those who want to take it home. So it appears what's happening here is the airport is relying, at least in its application, on its federal status, which allows them to exclude waste oil generation when what it needs to do is count its waste oil generation for state purposes. And as we stated in our letter, it seems entirely likely that if you're a comprehensive FAA maintenance facility, you're generating more than a 55-gallon drum of waste oil and materials a month, which is what that threshold is under either the federal or the state law. On the other point that Mr. Egan raised, just briefly, last week I believe Mr. Abrahams asked whether they needed to have runway safety areas in order to be an airport, and they responded that they didn't know, which itself was somewhat troubling. They now say they don't. I think in our view that's somewhat immaterial whether they do need it or don't. The question is that under section 7.2 of the bylaw, there needs to be an independent determination that the location of a aviation field use will not be objectionable to the neighbors. And I would submit that not being able to provide a runway safety area when your runway backs right up onto a public way is entirely relevant to that determination under section 7.2. Happy to answer, obviously, any other questions that were raised in our response. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? Claudia, did you want to speak? Good. Go ahead, Claudia. Just unmute yourself. I have you unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yes. This is not about 3 hangars or 6 hangars. This is about granting a special permit to establish an airport. The hangars will be by right and as many as they want to do whatever they want in. It's not about meeting 6 criteria. That the board is still contemplating the granting of this special permit, knowing the application has no survey, no plot plan, and no dimensions, coupled by the fact that the deed for Berkshire Aviation was removed from the registry, and a Walter J. Kalazda airport you are trying to create here tonight that does not even exist yet, has been added to the registry of deeds and also has no deed, is disturbing. I'm being told I have nothing to worry about. If this is true, let's get a survey. Let's get some type of dimensions. Let's get a deed recorded in the registry of deeds for this parcel before the granting of a special permit. It's called transparency. I don't even know who owns this parcel. Do you? I want to be very clear about the runway safety areas. A privately owned airport does not have oversight and does not need to be in compliance. They can do whatever they want within the perimeter of their property. Once an airport changes from private to public use, and that is what you are doing, it has to be brought into compliance and with FAA rule. That means needing the required 200 feet from the end of the usable takeoff and landing area to be an airport that BAE does not own on either end of the runway. The town is consistently, erroneously documenting my property as merely residential, even though they made it commercial in 2010, setting the stage to acquire it. A couple of comments on Mr. Scalise on your last supplemental amendment, claiming 50% of the aircraft at Berkshire Aviation use unleaded fuel. Is untrue. There's no such thing, a de-leaded fuel. Is untrue. There's no such thing as de-leaded fuel. There's a product known as unleaded fuel. But all those planes housed at the airport use unleaded fuel. You claim no runway expansion is not only your claim no runway expansion is not only contrary to your application, but if true, that means more little planes coming into BAE spewing more leaded gas because that is what they run on. All those little planes, Mr. Scalise, and you are a pilot and you know so. Your in-house delineation, resource area delineation is just that, an in-house conflict of interest. There's a 500-foot moratorium on the Green River in the town zoning bylaw, chapter 168, chapter 217, article 3, and at the conservation at the town of greatbarrington.org. This public meeting, to me, is not open, public, or transparent. Not knowing who is present lacks transparency. Is the Mass DOT present tonight? Is the Mass DOT Aeronautics present tonight? The Mass DOT Aeronautics pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 90, Section 39B. No one may establish, alter, activate, or deactivate an airport without first obtaining a certificate approval by the Mass Aeronautics Division pursuant to 702 Commonwealth Mass Regulations. You issue certificates of approval for airports and hold public meetings in the town first. Is that what's happening here tonight? Your approval is limited to the facts submitted in the application by the airport, and I am stating for the record that those facts are based on lies. The airport does not own enough property to be a real airport. They need my property to be a real airport. Under Commonwealth Massachusetts Regulations, Aeronautics Division 5.03, applicants proposing an airport on property that is partially on land not owned or controlled by the applicant and owned or controlled by others must obtain authorization from the owner or person in control of the property. The signature of that person must be notarized, and such written notarization must expressly authorize the applicant to use the property and for the activities set forth in the application. This applies directly to my piece of an airport I maintain. Is the Mass DOT here tonight? You approve municipal combustion facilities. The special permit application and supplements are specific answers to your Bureau of Waste Prevention Solid Waste Form 15, new or expanded combustion facilities. And under Massachusetts General Law 21D, Massachusetts Hazardous Waste Facility Siting Act, I, being the owner of record to the property being proposed, was proposed behind my back and without my approval. And I am stating for the record, I'm withdrawing my property from the consideration as a suggested site, but I do have a site suggestion for you to air on the radio stations, television stations, newspapers, and to all abutting communities, and to the chief executive officer of each community as required under Chapter 21D. The date? The town has not furnished me with one piece of paper to combat my years of documenting the same claim over and over again. Over 350.
Claudia, your time is well over, so could you wrap up, please?
Two sentences left.
Thank you.
Over 350 unnumbered, unorganized pages for a special permit application by a bunch of professionals. Thanks for my 3 minutes speaking time.
Ellen House?
Hold on.
It's Jeffrey House, 99 Hurlburt Road.
Thank you, Jeff.
I would like to piggyback off of Claudia's well-worded Massachusetts statewide airport system plan. And there's a specific thing in this 279-page document that specifically picks out 3 airports, and it's the Stowe Airport in Stowe, Mass, Northampton Airport, and Walter Kalazda Airport. And it says here, Massachusetts airports listed in the NPIAS, 3 airports, Great Barrington, Northampton, and Stowe Airfield are actually privately owned. This is a very important distinction in that while inclusion in the NPIAS typically enables airports to receive federal AIP funding, the fact that these airports are privately owned makes them ineligible for such federal funding. This important distinction will be considered throughout the MASP document. So somehow they have to become a legitimate airport, because they're really, in the eyes of the town, they're really not. So once they can do that, then he will be able to change the ownership in some ways. I don't know how. A lawyer can probably do that, or he could tell you. And once he does that, then he will be eligible for funding from the federal government to improve his runway, because right now, under this Massachusetts statewide airport system plan, which was actually initiated back in 2008, and it was issued in 2010. So it's almost 10 years old, and his airport, the runway at the airport was in fair condition 10 years ago. So right now, the runway probably is less than fair, and the state would rather it to be in good condition. So he has to, if he's a privately funded airport, he can't get any funds from anybody, and he has to come up with the funds to actually put the hangars up, put the new runway, a new surface on the runway, put new lighting into the airport, put other electrical stuff that you need to run an airport, and beacons and weather devices. It's all listed on this thing here, and they cannot do that if they are not recognized as an airport. Once they get recognized, once you say, okay, we'll grant you the special permit. Okay, now you're an airport. Okay, now I can go to the state and I can get this funding to fix the runway, to put the hangars in there. I can put new lighting in here. And if you go to I Googled Stowe Airport. And at the Stowe Airport, which is just like Walter Kalazda Airport, there are two flight schools that are on the Stowe Airport site. So right now, Berkshire Aviation runs an airfield out of a flight school out of the airport. So if technically they could someone else could start another flight school, which would be more planes. So that's one point. The other point is there is a definite safety concern at the end of the airport. School buses go by there on the way to Steiner School. How does the state overlook that? I don't understand it. I mean, it's like an accident waiting to happen, and I don't understand how the state just overlooks that. Oh yeah, there's school buses going by there, but it's okay if the plane overshoots the airway and hits a school bus, because they can't purchase the end of that runway. But at the other end of the runway where Claudia lives, there's a piece of land that they could purchase if they were so inclined to do so. But
Jeff, your time is about up, so if you could just wrap up.
So,
please.
I mean, those are my point. And the last point is there is no hours of operation at the airport. Do you guys control that? Do you guys control the hours of operation at the airport? I don't think so. They fly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day. And nobody controls it. The other day, I was down at my brother-in-law's house, and in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, an airport landed and took off. They're not supposed to do that. So nobody controls really what goes on there. And the hours of operation would be a serious consideration for the town to look into to alleviate some of the noise level problems on weekends. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I see no one else's hand up, so that's going to conclude all the public input we're going to take on this project. We'll start.
What's wrong? Why?
What
do you mean I blew what you were saying? What do you mean?
Okay. Claudia, did you want to make a process point?
Eleanor would like to say something.
It's just a few words. I
The
can't.
name and address, please.
Yeah, it's Eleanor Windman, 106 Egremont Plain Road, which is in Egremont.
Yeah, we're not allowing speakers. It's just Great Barrington Housatonic.
Okay.
Okay, let us start the process for the select board. And David Dineski, our town attorney, is on the line. So select board, start with your questions, either to David, to Chris, or to Dennis, if you have any. And then we'll talk with David about closing the public hearing.
I have two.
Yes, go right ahead.
One is for the applicant. I had written down in notes that there were 5 requests for hangars or 5 people currently on a waiting list, but I don't know where I wrote that or where I got that. I just want to make sure that's correct, or did I make that up?
That was the original number. That is accurate, and I don't know, quite frankly, what the updated number is.
All right, thank you. I'm not crazy. That's nice to know.
I can get that for you before this hearing is over.
And then the other question was your response to my question about whether you needed a special permit for the oil under 9.2.12. I didn't quite understand your response. You seem to be saying under number 1 you don't need a special permit. Under number 3 you don't need a special permit. Therefore, you don't need a special permit. In other words, it says the following uses and activities are permitted only upon the issuance of a special permit by the Board of Selectmen under such conditions as it may require. And then number 2 is those activities that involve the handling of toxic or hazardous materials in quantity greater than those associated with normal household use permitted in the underlying zoning district, except as prohibited here and under. Such activities shall require a special permit preventing contamination from groundwater. So I'm not sure. I mean, you do handle toxic materials in excess of quantities used with household use.
There's an exemption. There's an exemption for very small quantity generators, and that was the point that I was making, and that attorney Huber was talking.
The exemption is about the prohibition. The exemption, you're claiming the exemption is about needing a special permit. In other words, this says you need a special permit and you can do it if it's not exempt. If it's not, so I get that it is exempt from the prohibition, but I don't see how it's exempt from the special permit. I've misread 9.2.12 before, or at least I've been overruled by the zoning board. So I guess if that's your point, I guess I would then throw the question to our attorney to see if I'm understanding that right.
David, do you want to weigh in on this? Just unmute yourself, David, please. David, unmute yourself, please.
My apologies. If Mr. Abrahams could reference the section regarding permitted again, because I did read correspondence with respect to the prohibition exemption, and I would agree with the description that Mr. Abrahams gave, that there's an exemption from those uses that are specified as prohibited. And I believe his question related to those uses that are designated as requiring a special permit. In particular, in this case, generating or using toxic materials in greater than household quantities. Just the particular reference to the section again?
9.2.12. And then number 2 under that.
I'm just scrolling through if you bear with me a moment.
Yeah, no problem.
Not hazardous waste generators, I am.
By its terms, that type of use in 9.2.12.2 would trigger a special permit requirement. I don't know whether there's been any prior interpretation that may relate to how this has been applied either to this property or another property. But on its face, I think that's a question that does raise an issue. So I'm not sure if there's anyone else who can speak to that from an historical perspective.
Jim Scalise, you had your hand up. Did you want to answer that? Do you have some?
Yes, I guess I did some of the zoning work on this project. And if you look under earlier in the Water Quality Protection Overlay District section, if you look at 9.2.2, as I read that, because we are not, we don't have a new or expanded use that includes handling or using oil or hazardous materials, then the section is not applicable. I'll leave that to the attorneys to debate, but under section 9.2.2, overlay district, I believe that is why it doesn't apply to us. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at section 922 briefly.
Yes.
And given that we're talking about a multi-page section, and I would want to be able to provide an opinion that reflects review of all sections that may impact this issue, I'm not sure I'm prepared to say that the comment that Mr. Scalise just gave would be a basis for determining that the special permit requirement doesn't apply.
Okay, we're not making any decisions tonight, so David, we'll look forward to your ruling, your interpretation.
Thank you.
I guess going along with that, if there is a problem with the water quality, like needing a permit there, how does that affect our decision or our ability to make a decision on the special permit and the airport bylaw, the 7.2? So you can think about that also.
Yes.
Other questions from the board?
I had a question about the hangars. Is the building of the hangars by right? Could they build the hangars without this special permit and just go through the building inspector and through the usual permitting to build hangars?
Chairman, I'm happy to answer that question if you wish. Because the current use is a pre-existing non-conforming use under Massachusetts law, any expansion of that pre-existing use requires a special permit, in this case from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So there is no by right construction unless the zoning enforcement officer, who in this case is the building inspector, makes a determination that the pre-existing non-conforming use is being expanded. And I can't imagine that would be the case in this case. So in order to build the hangars, a special permit is required. In this case, as my supplemental information that I submitted last week indicates, we chose to apply for a special permit from the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, I should say.
Other question? Yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Okay. So I realized when I asked this question last week, you said for full transparency, that's the reason why you went to the Select Board instead of the ZBA. Is that correct? So there's nothing else attached to this rather than the 6 hangars.
That's correct. I mean,
the special permit is to allow airfield use at 70 Egremont Plain Road. It just so happens that part of the master plan of the airport is the construction of these hangars. So this special permit, if it were granted, is not simply to build the hangars. The special permit requests that the use be made a conforming use.
Okay. My other question is about the runoffs. So I just wanted confirmation about these safety areas. One of the speakers tonight mentioned that they own the land that would be considered the runoff safety area. So I just want to get some clarification on whether this is needed and why, if it's not needed, why is that?
Runway safety areas are not needed, are not required because the airport does not take state or federal funding.
Okay, so if this becomes an airport, would this then open up that possibility of the runway safety areas being needed?
To the best of my knowledge, the answer is no, because this is a function of zoning and not a determination as to whether the airport is made an airport as opposed to an airfield. I'm not an expert in aviation law, but I can get that answer, certainly get that answer. But my interpretation is this is a zoning exercise and not anything beyond that would require runway safety areas.
Chris or David, do you want to weigh in on that, or would you like to come back to us with answers to that?
Mr. Chairman, I would say that I would agree that questions of zoning are distinct from questions of requirements under other regulations, either state or federal. And if there's a requirement in multiple jurisdictions, if you will, each of those would need to be met. I don't have enough information to provide an answer as to whether a zoning approval would constitute this property or the airfield as an airport on that private-public divide issue that has already been spoken to.
Thank you, David.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may just clarify one more thing as to why the runway safety areas are not required under federal law. Also, another reason they're not required is because the airport does not accommodate planes with 9 seats or larger, just to clarify that. And then if I may have an answer to Mr. Abrams' question regarding the number of hangar spaces requested. That 5 number was 5 people that don't currently have a plane at the airport. The fact of the matter is requests have outstripped demand, and so each of the hangar spaces is essentially accounted for, or at least requests made for a hangar space. Thank you.
Lee, do you want to continue?
Yeah, I mean, I just, for me, I just feel like there's questions in my mind on what this will trigger if this becomes a full-scale airport. So,
Chris, you addressed this at the last meeting. Do you want to address this? Well, I think what you basically said was we can condition what this would trigger, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Right. That's right, Steve. This is Chris speaking. I do think if the board moved forward, the board would have wide latitude to impose what conditions it thought were reasonable for this aviation field use. And to the extent the board was maybe suspecting that it might allow the permit might allow the airport to expand or operate in ways beyond its control. I think that the under zoning, the board has the ultimate authority. I guess I would wait town council's further clarification about whether or not there are other areas of law that would supersede local land use control. I don't think there are in this case. As a matter of fact, even Mass DOT Aeronautics Division a few years ago clarified, or maybe it was clarified in a lawsuit, I can't remember, that local land use control is purely the domain of the town and not Mass DOT as it relates to the use of the airport itself.
So I guess a devil's advocate. So if there are things that, maybe we're gonna, let's say that there are conditions but there are things that we are not aware of that this triggers, wouldn't one just go for the straight hangers, since it's just at least that way you wouldn't have these possibilities of something being triggered that we might not be aware of?
Well, as you heard the attorney say, Mr. Egan said that one way or the other, in order to build the hangars, they would need to have a special permit, either to expand a pre-existing non-conforming use, or from the select board to be a permitted aviation field. A hangar is an accessory structure, and you're only allowed to permit an accessory structure by right if the use itself is deemed legal. And in this case, there are only two ways. So that's in our bylaw. In this case, there are only two ways to do that, and one is to have the ZBA grant a permit. The other way is for the select board to grant a special permit. So they need a special permit either way before proceeding to building accessory structures as proposed.
So Chris, let me ask this question, because maybe this is what Lee was trying to ask, and Lee, correct me if I'm wrong. Could we approve the special permit, and this is just hypothetical, only for the purpose of building hangars? Could we restrict any other improvements, for lack of a better term?
Yes. You could. There is a special permit application in front of you that asks you to determine an aviation use and approve the hangars. That's all that it's asking, and you could approve it on the face of it, I believe, and write whatever conditions you thought were reasonable and required to ensure that your intent is clear.
So following up on that, Chris, could we split that and not approve, let's say, hypothetically, the aviation use, but approve the hangars? Or are they all, because this came in as an application combined, there is no way to do that?
No, you can't split it.
Okay.
The hangars cannot be built as accessory structures without a special permit from either the select board for the aviation use or from the ZBA to change or expand a pre-existing non-conforming use.
Okay, so basically the only way to separate the hangars from approving this as aviation use would
You cannot separate the hangars from a special permit.
But I'm saying that if they wanted to have the hangars approved as an accessory structure, they could go to the ZBA for that permit, for a special permit, just for the hangars.
Possibly, yes.
So I have a question.
Yes, Bill.
I mean, I'm looking at section 7, 7.2, general, any aviation field, public or private, with essential accessories shall comply with the following special requirements. And the first one is it shall be so located that it's not likely to become objectionable to adjoining and nearby property because of noise, traffic. How are we getting around that? I don't see how we get by that to even go to the special permit part. Are we giving them a special permit to ignore this part of the bylaw?
Bill, is that a question for me? I think that is something that should be under your consideration. I'm not answering that. That is something that you will have to consider, I believe, in your deliberations.
So what you're saying is if we think this airport would be objectionable in some manner, then we shouldn't approve the special permit. Because it wouldn't meet the criteria.
It seems to me that there's been a little bit of objection from the neighbors, and that's what it seems to me. I don't know. I'm stuck when I get to this. I don't know.
Me too.
How we can even consider a special permit.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, we excuse me if I'm wrong, with David or Chris or Mark, someone, we're considering it because it was applied for. So we have no choice but to consider it. It doesn't mean we have to approve it.
Right. I guess that's my point.
Are we getting ahead on deliberating?
No.
No, we're still talking about, it, but I had the same question and concerns.
Any other questions from the board? David, if we want to close the public hearing tonight, which I would like to do, once we close it, do we have to set a date and time for the deliberations, or can that be up to the chair and the vice chair?
I would recommend that if you close, you do at least specify a first next session for deliberation, which will allow for all those interested parties to know next.
Thank you. Jim Scalise, do you have something to add? Jim, I see your hand up. If you have something to add, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't see the button to unmute. I was already talking, so my apologies. I'll start again.
Sure.
I just was, if allowed, I would just respond to the that section 1 under aviation fields. As the author of many parts of this application, I guess my interpretation is that it shall not be so located that is likely to become objectionable. And I guess my interpretation of that, and I may be looking at the glass half full here, is that because the use is pre-existing. Meaning, I think if you look at that paragraph, it's written with the author's assumption that, a denial kind of makes the airfield go away. We already have an airfield. Denying this special permit doesn't change its use or any of the activities that are occurring now. The aviation field is existing. And I'm of the firm opinion that adding some hangars to park aircraft indoors won't make it more objectionable. We're not adding aircraft. That's not what we're asking for. We're not expanding runways or increasing aircraft size. We're simply moving aircraft that are parked outdoors and parking them indoors. Thank you.
David, did you want to respond to that at all, or Chris?
Not at this point, Mr. Chairman. I think there's some refinement that's probably appropriate, and I think it's better to have that addressed upon a more comprehensive review of both the record and the elements of the bylaw. I will say, and I think this has probably been the sense just from the little I have read thus far, and probably how the board is experiencing it, this is a bit of a hybrid situation simply because, as is recognized, we have something that presently exists, and the thrust of the request is to confirm, if you will, or validate that use as the type of use for which a special permit may be granted, notwithstanding the fact that the representation is it exists as a legal non-conforming use.
Thank you. There are a couple hands up, and I will tell you that public comment has been closed. So we will not be taking any more public comment. Ed, do you want to make a motion to close the public hearing and continue the deliberations to October 5th at 6 p.m.? You're muted.
So moved.
And second.
David, is that acceptable?
That's an appropriate motion. The only question is whether there are any pieces of information or evidence that the board would still want to receive. And if that's the case, I'd recommend that you keep the record open for that purpose and therefore not close the hearing tonight. I know there was one, or there were a couple of items that Attorney Egan identified. I believe he responded to one about the number of hangar requests. I don't recall specifically the content of another that he had represented who could provide information on, and perhaps he may be able to offer some comment on that.
Could we still get information from you, though, if we close the public hearing?
You could receive an opinion, in my view, but if it's the case, and I simply don't know at this point whether that might beget further questions or inquiry of either the applicant or others, or the need to look at additional information that you want to have in the record, that's something you wouldn't be able to do.
Lee?
So I guess, my concern is closing the public hearing. If let's say I had other questions that I wouldn't be able to ask.
Well, I was assuming that we've had a lot of time to ask questions, but if you think you're going to have more, then we won't close the public hearing. That's up to you.
I mean, I guess my question is, when we meet October 5th, if there's a question between now and October 5th, and am I able to ask it via email and have that answer October 5th? I'm just wondering if.
Mr. Chairman, it wouldn't be the case that we could answer or pose or answer questions via email or by any other method outside
the
confines of the public process.
Okay.
So if we don't close the public hearing, David, we don't have to continue to take public comment?
Yeah, that's fine. You can conduct as chair and set the terms of the proceeding. And that the public comment is a component of the public hearing. So it would be appropriate, as you've done this evening, to determine that the public comment period is over. Now, you've done that for tonight's meeting.
Yes.
You may not necessarily need to say tonight that it's over for the entire proceeding, but you certainly could do so at the next session if you continue the hearing. And from what I'm listening to at this point, I would probably recommend that you do keep the hearing open.
Okay, so Ed, will you withdraw your motion, and Bill, you withdraw your second?
Yes.
And Ed, will you just make a motion to continue the public hearing to October 5th at 6 p.m. via virtual meeting?
So moved.
And second.
And it's going to be a roll call vote. Lee?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And aye, it's unanimous. So we will continue this till October 5th at 6 p.m. Okay, citizens speak. Let me remind you that at advice of our attorney, citizens speak cannot occur on any matter that's before us. It's a public hearing. So the public hearing is over with for tonight. We will not take comments about the airport at Citizens Speak. So. Lori Robbins, you have your hand up?
I was, but only with regard to the airport, but I didn't, then you said that the public comment section was over, so I guess.
That's correct.
All right, never mind.
Thank you. Anyone else? Claudia, go ahead. Claudia, did you want to speak about something other than the airport?
I will try to call you tomorrow regarding the FAA determination. Do you stop there, me?
Claudia, did you have anything else? Your hand was up. Did you have anything else?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I wanted to say a couple things. The airport cannot get a hazardous waste permit.
You can't talk about the airport now.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, Claudia. Anyone else would like to speak? Okay, seeing no one, we will move ahead to select board time. Is Kate back? Lee, you go first.
No, thank you. Nothing for me.
Kate? Bill? Unmute yourself, please.
I do have one thing. The house at number 7 Rose Court in Blue Hill Commons. It's an affordable home ownership opportunity. The price is $145,000. Permanently affordable, 1 bedroom. If you go to gbhousing.org, there's information there under the programs.
Thank you, Bill. Ed, do you have anything?
Nothing.
And Kate, are you back with us? I do not believe she is. Media time. I see no one raising their hand. So by unanimous consent, I consider this meeting to be adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.